The scene in The Mandalorian where Luke Skywalker dismantles the Dark Troopers is often hailed as a defining moment for Star Wars fans. It encapsulates what they have longed to see for decades, a portrayal of Luke at the height of his abilities, embodying the hope and heroism that made him an iconic character. This moment wasn't just an action sequence. It was a manifestation of a long-held collective dream, reminding fans of the original trilogy's spirit and ethos. However, the question remains, why did this resonate so profoundly? And why does it seem out of Disney's reach to replicate this consistently across their stewardship of the franchise? To understand why this scene worked so well, one must consider the legacy of Luke Skywalker. In the original trilogy, Luke's journey was the backbone of the narrative. Starting as a wide-eyed farm boy on the desert planet of Tatooine, he evolved into the galaxy's ultimate hope against tyranny. His character arc, marked by trials of faith, strength, and wisdom, culminated in a profound act of mercy and selflessness in Return of the Jedi. Luke became a symbol of balance, powerful but compassionate, disciplined yet optimistic. For fans, the original trilogy left Luke as a beacon of hope, a hero who had triumphed not just through skill, but through understanding the emotional depth of what it meant to be a Jedi. This image of Luke as the ideal Jedi was something fans carried for decades, largely unchallenged in the broader cultural imagination. Then came the sequel trilogy, and with it, a portrayal of Luke that left many fans feeling disheartened. In The Last Jedi, Luke was depicted as disillusioned, bitter, and withdrawn, a stark contrast to the hero who once stood resolutely against the Emperor. While this version of Luke resonated with some for its complexity and deviation from the archetypal hero's journey, for many, it felt like a betrayal of the character's established arc. Luke was no longer the triumphant symbol of hope. He had become a cautionary tale, emblematic of failure. The Dark Trooper sequence in The Mandalorian felt like a corrective to this. It delivered what fans had yearned for, a glimpse of the Luke they remembered, entering the Imperial ship with calm confidence. Clad in his Jedi robes and wielding his green lightsaber, Luke methodically destroyed the droid soldiers with a mastery that felt both effortless and awe-inspiring. The pacing of the scene allowed viewers to absorb the sheer power and control he exhibited. The visual storytelling, paired with a swelling score, struck a chord that seemed to say, "This is the Luke you've been waiting for." It wasn't just about power, it was about ethos. Luke didn't revel in destruction or dominance. His actions were precise, focused, and purposeful, embodying the discipline of a true Jedi. In contrast to Vader's brutal hallway massacre in Rogue One, which highlighted raw and terrifying power, Luke's sequence in The Mandalorian felt restrained and honorable. This distinction mattered. Luke's display of power didn't just serve as fan service. It reinforced his philosophical grounding as a Jedi who uses strength for protection and justice, not for conquest. For many fans, this moment was a vindication, proof that Lucasfilm could still deliver on the core values of Star Wars. It underscored the importance of character fidelity, showing a Luke who was consistent with the ideals established in the original trilogy. The scene was as much about nostalgia as it was about restoring faith in a franchise that many felt had lost its way. It brought the past into the present in a way that felt organic rather than forced, honoring the original spirit of Star Wars while breathing new life into it. But why can't Disney replicate this formula consistently? The answer lies in their broader approach to the franchise. Disney's stewardship of Star Wars has been marked by an attempt to balance nostalgia with innovation, often erring too far in one direction or the other. The sequel trilogy, for instance, tried to subvert expectations while simultaneously leaning heavily on familiar imagery and characters. This resulted in a disjointed narrative where characters like Luke felt inconsistent with their established personas. Part of the issue is the tension between artistic storytelling and corporate decision-making. Under Disney, Star Wars has become as much a brand as a narrative universe. The push for merchandise, spin-offs, and theme park integrations means decisions are often driven by marketability rather than storytelling cohesion. This is evident in the inconsistent tone and character arcs across the sequel trilogy. Each installment seemed to have a different vision, with J.J. Abrams and Rian Johnson pulling the story in opposing directions. This lack of narrative unity left characters like Luke feeling adrift, their arcs serving the needs of the moment rather than a larger, cohesive story. Moreover, Disney's focus on appealing to the broadest possible audience has sometimes diluted the franchise's thematic depth. In trying to cater to every demographic, the films and shows often avoid taking strong, definitive stances, resulting in stories that can feel hollow or uncommitted. This contrasts sharply with the focused storytelling of The Mandalorian, which operates within a smaller scope, but with greater emotional resonance. The Dark Trooper scene worked because it wasn't bogged down by the need to serve multiple, conflicting agendas. It was a singular moment, crafted with a clear understanding of what fans wanted to see. Another challenge for Disney is the weight of fan expectations. Star Wars is more than just a series of films. It's a cultural touchstone with a deeply invested fanbase. Fans come to the franchise with decades of emotional investment and a sense of ownership over the characters and stories. Meeting these expectations requires not only an understanding of the source material but also a willingness to respect its legacy. The Dark Trooper sequence succeeded because it felt like a moment made by creators who understood and respected Luke's significance. By contrast, much of Disney's Star Wars output has struggled to strike this balance. The reliance on subversion for the sake of surprise, as seen in The Last Jedi, alienated many fans who felt the franchise was losing touch with its foundational values. At the same time, the excessive reliance on nostalgia, as seen in The Rise of Skywalker, often felt superficial, lacking the emotional depth needed to make it resonate. This inconsistency has eroded trust among fans, making it difficult for Disney to deliver moments that feel both fresh and authentic. Disney's challenge is further compounded by the constraints of corporate storytelling. Unlike the original trilogy, which was shaped by George Lucas's singular vision, Disney's Star Wars is a product of committee decision-making. While this approach allows for a diversity of voices, it also risks diluting the creative focus needed to produce a cohesive narrative. The Dark Trooper scene, by contrast, felt like the result of a clear and unified creative vision, unburdened by the need to serve competing corporate priorities. It was a moment crafted with precision, intent, and respect for the source material. Ultimately, the Luke Skywalker scene in The Mandalorian succeeded because it tapped into the core values that made Star Wars a cultural phenomenon in the first place. It celebrated hope, heroism, and the triumph of good over evil, embodied in a character who had become a symbol of those ideals. For fans, it was a reminder of what Star Wars could be at its best. But for Disney, replicating this success requires more than just technical proficiency or nostalgia. It demands a commitment to storytelling that prioritizes the heart of the franchise over its commercial trappings. The Dark Trooper sequence in The Mandalorian stands out as one of the few scenes in the Disney era of Star Wars that truly feels worthy of the franchise's towering legacy. In the decades since George Lucas first introduced audiences to a galaxy far, far away, Star Wars has become synonymous with sweeping heroism, profound emotional stakes, and a deeply ingrained mythological resonance. Yet, much of the modern content under Disney's stewardship has struggled to live up to this standard, often prioritizing spectacle, subversion, or brand expansion over the soul of the narrative. Luke Skywalker's triumphant return in The Mandalorian transcends this pattern, delivering a moment that not only aligns with the legacy of the original trilogy but reinforces why Star Wars became a cultural cornerstone in the first place. To understand why this scene is such a rarity, one must examine the essence of Star Wars' legacy. At its heart, the original trilogy wasn't just about space battles or lightsaber duels. It was a deeply human story of redemption, faith, and hope. Characters like Luke Skywalker embodied these themes, navigating struggles that mirrored the universal hero's journey. Audiences connected with Luke not because he was the most powerful Jedi, but because his triumphs and failures reflected timeless truths about perseverance, self-discovery, and the power of compassion. The galaxy he inhabited, while fantastical, was grounded by these emotional and moral underpinnings. The Dark Trooper scene taps directly into this legacy. It doesn't merely show Luke as a skilled warrior. It frames him as the embodiment of everything a Jedi should be. The deliberate pacing of the scene, the calm determination in Luke's demeanor, the precision of his movements, reminds viewers that Jedi mastery isn't just about physical strength but about balance and purpose. Every action he takes is imbued with meaning, reflecting his role as a protector and a symbol of hope. This is the Luke Skywalker who stood unwavering before Darth Vader and the Emperor, who believed in the possibility of redemption even in the face of overwhelming darkness. This is the hero fans have always envisioned, brought to life in a way that feels authentic and reverent. Few other moments in Disney's Star Wars catalog have achieved this level of resonance. While the sequel trilogy, standalone films, and spin-off series have offered flashes of brilliance, they often feel disconnected from the deeper themes that define the franchise. The Force Awakens leaned heavily on nostalgia, reintroducing familiar elements without significantly expanding on them. The Last Jedi attempted to deconstruct the mythology of Star Wars, presenting a more cynical take on the galaxy and its heroes. While bold in concept, this approach alienated many fans who felt it undermined the franchise's core values. The Rise of Skywalker swung in the opposite direction, drowning in fan service that felt more like a checklist than a meaningful conclusion. None of these efforts fully captured the mythological weight or emotional sincerity that defined the original trilogy. This is where the Dark Trooper scene sets itself apart. Unlike many modern Star Wars moments, it doesn't feel like a product of corporate calculation or a deliberate attempt to subvert expectations. Instead, it feels like an organic extension of the story George Lucas started. The scene respects the weight of Luke's legacy while also presenting it in a fresh, exciting context. It doesn't just echo the past. It builds on it, showing Luke not as a relic of an earlier era, but as a timeless figure who continues to inspire. The scene's impact is amplified by its stark contrast to other portrayals of Luke in the Disney era. The version of Luke in The Last Jedi, disillusioned, withdrawn, and reluctant, felt alien to many fans because it clashed so sharply with the character they had come to know and admire. While some appreciated the attempt to explore Luke's failures and vulnerabilities, the execution left others feeling that the filmmakers had fundamentally misunderstood his essence. By contrast, the Luke in The Mandalorian reclaims his heroic stature, reminding viewers of why they fell in love with the character in the first place. It's a portrayal that feels earned, rooted in the character's established arc, and deeply satisfying. Perhaps what makes this scene even more extraordinary is the broader context in which it appears. The Mandalorian operates on a smaller scale than the saga films, focusing on intimate, character-driven storytelling rather than galaxy-spanning conflicts. Yet, it is precisely this grounded approach that allows the Dark Trooper sequence to shine. Free from the weight of franchise-spanning expectations, the creators of The Mandalorian were able to craft a moment that felt both grand and personal, resonating on a level that the larger films often miss. Luke's arrival is the culmination of a story arc that had been carefully and patiently developed, making it feel earned rather than gratuitous. This moment underscores what has often been missing from Disney's broader approach to Star Wars: a willingness to trust the legacy of the franchise. Too often, modern Star Wars content has felt like it is either trying too hard to innovate or leaning too heavily on nostalgia without fully understanding what made the originals work. The Dark Trooper scene succeeds because it doesn't try to reinvent the wheel. It simply delivers a powerful, emotionally resonant moment that aligns perfectly with the ethos of the franchise. It's a reminder that Star Wars at its best doesn't need to rely on elaborate plot twists or overwhelming visual effects. It thrives when it focuses on its characters, their journeys, and the timeless themes they embody.